Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon, and we're going to talk about the business side of comic book publishing and board game tabletop publishing because there are shortages. Yeah, this is a real thing. Paper is in short supply. Apparently, a lot of comic book publishers are blaming paper shortages on late books. We've got Image Comics announcing that it's no longer going to do second printings due to a paper shortage. We've got shipping problems and a paper shortage to blame for the lack of board games this holiday season. It's interesting. We talked about IDW a couple of weeks ago about how they were pulling the plug on their board game division. And I thought it was weird because a lot of their Kickstarters actually did pretty well. And it seemed like it was actually a profitable division for IDW. But I have to wonder if the supply chain issues are part of the reason that they made that decision. They're like, well, why should we bother kickstarting games if we can't get them produced? DC Comics blaming the paper shortage on their late books. We're going to talk about this before we get into it any further. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. Over 238,000 subs. Thank you so much for the support. Greatly appreciate it. We do talk about the comic book industry, printing comics, making comics. In fact, we make our own. If you go to shopclownfish.com, we do have Shadow Binders graphic novels in stock. They're already printed. They're already shipped to us. So you don't have to worry about any delays. You can get the first two books. They're hardcover out on shopclownfish.com. Just had to give a little plug for our own stuff. So yeah, comic book retailers kind of freaking out that due to the paper shortage, Image isn't doing second, third, fourth, etc. prints for the foreseeable future. Make sure you get your pre-orders in. I gotta wonder if this isn't gonna hurt comic shops. I really gotta wonder about this. We'll go out to ICV2. Image calls a halt to second printings due to paper shortage. Also, they're tightening up damage criteria for retailer exclusive covers. Image Comics has informed retailers that it will no longer do second printings for any of its titles for the foreseeable future, and it's also tightening its criteria for assessing damages of retailer exclusive covers. Alex Cox, Image's director of specialty sales, announced the new second printing policy in the weekly FOC update emailed to retailers on October 22nd, pointing to paper shortages and shipping delays that are creating supply chain problems throughout the industry and the country. Cox said, "At Image, we're proactively streamlining our releases to reflect these circumstances. Please keep this in mind as you order. There will be limited stock available for reorders, and we will not be reprinting anything that sells through at the distributor level. We're also adjusting the schedule of upcoming titles over the next few weeks to reflect a more responsible usage of raw material availability. This week is a lighter offering than what you might have expected, and these printings will be the only printings." Image has frequently sent comics back to press for second printings in recent years, but they did try to eliminate the practice in 2012 with Saga. It's another wrinkle to add to the increasingly difficult to navigate comic book direct market. I mean, we've got multiple distributors now. We've got comic shops closing down, and now we've got a paper shortage. Comics Beat did an article on this yesterday. And what was interesting is they said it's not just Image Comics. We're going to talk about DC Comics too, but apparently it's affecting people doing their crowdfunders. Heidi McDonald said that she was talking to someone who had a Kickstarter, even though this person's ready to print the book. There's no paper or press time to do it. In fact, I reached out to our printer and yesterday, and I was kind of like, hey, do we need to worry about this? Because we actually have several comic book projects lined up for next year. Now, we don't print nearly as much as Marvel, DC, Image, but I was even kind of concerned, and I fired off an email. And I guess it's too early to tell at this point because our next books won't be ready until January, February of next year at the earliest. But I'm kind of concerned about it. I got to admit, I'm a little concerned about it. There isn't much anyone in the book business can do to fix this. Retailers, authors, and distributors are pleading with readers and customers to shop or order early. This is coming from the New York Times. This is coming, it's affecting the book industry too, obviously. Publishers are planning farther out in advance and sometimes even putting shipments of books on planes. One publisher said it currently costs 35 to 50 cents per book to send titles across the water and $5 to $8 by air. No one knows when things will go back to normal. It won't be until long after the holiday season. Perhaps the biggest issue going into the holidays will be reprints, which are necessary when the initial order of a book runs low and needs to be replenished. Normally, this kind of order takes about 3 weeks. Yeah, I mean, this is everything. It was a topic of conversation at New York Comic Con, Baltimore Comic Con. One industry insider told Heidi bluntly, there isn't any paper. We've actually heard this from friends of ours who work for publishers, and they're like, yeah, we're having a hard time getting press time because there's no paper. Some foresee an inevitable rise in cover prices, a slowdown in variant editions, and rising interest in back issues, and of course, a shift to digital. Hey, it's good news for the comic shops that have stopped stocking new comics and they rely solely on back issue sales. It's good news for people who have maybe done crowdfunders and have a bunch of books on hand ready to ship, like we do. Just saying. It's not just paper and books. The root cause of all this is the Americans are just buying lots and lots of stuff. Well, that in the ports, I mean, it's a problem. It's a huge problem. And it's not just books, it's tabletop games too. This was time a couple of months ago. The board game business is booming, but the global shipping crisis could be disastrous. This is September. And, in August, Board Game Geek had that a lot of places were not able to get their games manufactured, let alone shipped. Maggie Clayton, the director of sales and marketing for Greater Than Games, we've had a container of our most popular games sitting in China since May of this year, she tells Time. We have taken pre-orders for it, so all that product is technically sold except for the fact that we don't have the games or the money yet. So we're in this weird situation where there's high demand for our products because of the increase in people playing games during the pandemic, but we just can't get the product over here. So it's a double-edged sword. Due to the need for plastics and other raw materials, they're usually sourced overseas, as well as the high cost of manufacturing in the US. Smaller game companies often have no choice but to order their products abroad. Now, board game creators and publishers are trying everything from negotiating to collective action to keep their businesses afloat. I really have to wonder if this didn't have something to do with IDW pulling out of board games altogether. They're like, we need money now, and we can't wait a year until all of this gets sorted out for us to be able to sell games again. Hasbro had a 20% jump in sales in 2020. Puzzle games went up. It increased nearly $1 billion. Fireside Games CEO Anne-Marie DeWitt said the company's most popular game, Castle Panic, saw about a 20% sales bump. Then the supply crisis hit. Yeah, we've heard about, we've talked about Wizards of the Coast, about Dungeons and Dragons, about how they're selling very well during the pandemic, but good luck getting the stuff made, right? While we were still trying to figure out whether we should use traditional metrics to guide us for Q4, the numbers were artificially inflated by the pandemic. We started hearing about shipping prices rising and rising. We've heard about this with toys too. We did a video on this. Toy prices are going to skyrocket. It's not necessarily the raw materials, but it's about getting the toys produced, and it's about getting the toys over here. While shipping prices had already been climbing prior to the pandemic, they ballooned out of control over the course of the last year. And a rising popularity of games usually means ordering more to keep stock on hand to sell. Before the pandemic hit, we were seeing 20-foot containers costing about $5,000 or so, which was up from $3,000 in years prior. Okay. We were fortunate enough to get one 20-foot container out at $9,000. Then our next two were $21,000 a piece. I've heard about some people paying $35,000 or even $40,000 for a 20-foot container. It's a crapshoot. Now, we'll be honest. We actually use a U.S. printer for our stuff. And, if I had to, I technically could drive to the printer and pick the books up and bring them here. And it's been a godsend for us. With previous versions of this book, we actually, used an overseas printer. But we had to change course, when we got the second run done here in during the pandemic. It was like, we had to get more books, and we frankly didn't know if and when we could get them, overseas. So we switched to a U.S. printer, and as far as I'm concerned, we're going to stick with that U.S. printer because I love the fact that we're getting these books printed in the USA. We're actually getting them done. I mean, it might be, a month or two later than we'd hoped because everybody's scrambling to find printers, but, at least we're able to get stuff done. So one positive, I guess, from this, at least, being based here in the States, is that, maybe we'll see kind of a return to American manufacturing out of necessity. People are going to probably try to say it's racism or something like that. No, it's we have to make sure that we can get stuff made. So I think we'll actually see more American manufacturing as a result of that, which is a good thing. But yeah, DC Comics blaming the late books on paper shortages and printer problems. I 100% believe this is the case. People were trying to say they were, some people were trying to say they were making excuses or whatever, or they're retooling stuff or yada yada. No, I think it's a shortage because it's not just them. Spawn selling hundreds of thousands of copies, and the series is being delayed due to the paper shortage. Again, Todd McFarlane actually posted on Twitter explaining that the industry-wide paper shortage got in the way of Gunslinger Spawn shipping out to retailers for its scheduled release date of October 20th. While the majority of the book's variant covers were printed and sent to Diamond, others were not. McFarlane offered an apology to fans saying, sorry for that, still coming, but it's just the way of the pandemic world we live in. That's it. You can't really do anything about it. He said he's dealing with it on the toy end of things too, because I'm sure the vast majority of McFarlane Toys stuff is manufactured overseas, and they still have to get it here. And that means the prices are going to go up on everything. Again, let's start, making stuff in North America again. That would be significantly easier. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this one up. This is a very real thing. It'll be interesting to see how it affects the comic book retailers, how it affects the collectibles market, because, collectibles frankly aren't a necessity. And if push comes to shove, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. Very interesting though. Going to wrap it up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We'll talk later.